Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Sober Bliss podcast with me, Gail from Sober Bliss. And today I am joined by the lovely Courtney Andersen. Hi, Courtney. It's so good to have you here.
No, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, you're a podcast host as well, aren't
Mm.
you?
I am of the Sober Vibes podcast, and it's so great. I have found some of the best guests are podcast hosts.
Yeah, so well, I hope I don't disappoint today in being a nice host. Yeah, so welcome, Courtney. It's so good to have you here. I've been really excited about this conversation because you've got such an interesting story. So I
Mhm.
wonder if you would mind telling everybody a little bit about you, and how you got here.
Yeah, so I am a sober coach, a podcast host, and an author. My book just came out. It's called Sober Vibes: A Guide to Thriving in Your First 3 months Without Alcohol.
Yeah.
And I'm also a mother of a 2-year-old, and I live in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan.
Wow.
Huge fan of coffee. Huge fan of coffee. That one came about in sobriety. But how I got here of, all of these things that brought me up to today is
Mm.
because I had a decade long alcohol addiction and love affair, like I like to call it, a toxic love affair that I quit drinking August 18th of 2012. And
Wow.
that's really the day that my life really truly began.
Mm.
I'm a firm believer of anyone in this journey who starts recovering in sobriety and becomes sober. It's like we get these two lives in one. There was one when we were using, and then there was one after when we quit, right?
Like the
And
before and after.
yeah, the
Yeah.
before and after. And what a gift. What a gift.
Mm.
Because it's two different perspectives of life. So when I quit drinking, I was 29 years old. I was just shy of being 30. I was like 6 weeks away from being 30. And my drinking started at 19. So it went on from 19 to 29. And I believe, like we all start drinking, it starts off very innocently. I don't think that anybody ever picks up a drink and is like, man, I'm gonna develop a drinking problem, right?
No.
So, right. So from 19 to 25, it was all innocently started off and then progressed and progressed. And by the time I was 25, it was a lot darker. And at 25, I knew I was going to have to quit drinking alcohol someday. I didn't know how, I didn't know when. I didn't say at 25, like today's the day. I just knew. But from
Wow.
25 to 29, I tried to moderate my drinking. I tried to manage it. And I lived in that cycle for 4 years, which is very exhausting.
Yeah.
Um, and so by the time I was 29, it was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm tired of this cycle. At that time, I lost my rescue cat for a second time because I was in a blackout
Mm.
and left the sliding glass door open when I went outside to go smoke a cigarette. And so she escaped. And then the boyfriend at the time, we lived together. He's like, "Look, you can continue to carry on drinking." He's like, "But I'm not going to continue to be in a relationship with you if that's the choice you make." So
Oh,
I haven't had a drink since that day.
and that was it.
That
Ah,
was it. But again, it was a 4-year buildup of that
yeah.
because it was the type where it was like, okay, I won't drink liquor today. I won't touch whiskey because whiskey is my problem. I have to make sure that I eat because we all know if I don't eat, I get really wasted, right? Like
Mm.
no mixing. And when you get in that cycle and in that management,
Yeah.
that it just becomes worse and worse and worse because you always start back where you left off.
Yes.
That's why I'm just with people with problems with alcohol, I don't believe in moderation because it's
Mm.
not. It's just an excuse to keep drinking and you will always lead back to where you started.
Exactly. And it's putting the focus in the wrong place, I think.
Mhm.
Instead
Mhm.
of focusing fully on what life could be like without it, we're
Yes.
still, as you say, trying to manage it, find a way to keep it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the focus is not fully on alcohol-free living. It's kind of one foot in and one foot out, which is very exhausting.
It's exhausting. And in this particular situation, again, with people who have problems with alcohol, you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's just it doesn't apply to this,
Mm,
because no matter what, you will always have that issue. There's no going back in time to be like, man, I really wish I could have that warm and fuzzy feeling with alcohol again like I did at 19. There's no turning back. There's a point of no return.
mm. Yeah, yeah. So how did you keep going after that
Yep.
realization, that point? What did you do in the beginning, and how have you kept kept it up?
Yeah. So I was not a person who again planned it out. I was just, after being in that hangover, my last hangover for the last time.
Mm,
I spent 3 days. Fiona was gone for 3 days. That's my cat. And on that third day, and in laying in my bed and dry heaving on the floor, and just like
mm,
an anxiety overwhelmed state, I said to the universe, like, if I find Fiona, I will give this a go, because this is now my sign, like,
mm.
you just can't drink alcohol. So I just took it a day at a time.
Yeah.
It's very cliche, but it is very true. Like, it was just like, I'm not going to drink alcohol today. And I did try AA in the beginning, but it was very overwhelming for me. I did not connect with God at that time.
Mm,
I did not believe in something greater than me at that time. So that was very hard to vibe with and identify with.
yeah.
And I had a lot of anxiety. So I really white knuckled it for up to 2 years.
Wow.
During that second year, I did get into nutrition and working out. So that was definitely help. But by the third year, I had started diving into personal development, which is a game changer. And
Mm,
then at that point, started to go back to therapy, in my recovery I've had 11 years now of sobriety and recovery. And I've tried everything. Like,
yeah.
I have never stopped turning away from help when I have needed it, because I am
Mm,
a big believer that you need different help at different times of your life, right?
yeah.
So, but honestly, it was that first year, it was just like, I'm not going to drink today. And my why was always at the forefront when I was looking at it every day, in the form of a little four-legged friend. And that
Oh,
boyfriend is now my husband. So it was like,
I
it
love
was one
that.
of those things. It's like, if I cannot love myself enough currently, I have to love something else besides myself enough to keep going,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
after you get out of it a couple months, you're like, okay, I'm starting to love myself, and I know that this is the best decision that I have made.
Well done, Courtney. That sounds amazing. And
Thank
when
you.
you say you white knuckled it, like what did that
Mhm.
look like? How did you manage? Because that's a long time to be like on your own, if you like.
Yeah, well, I did have a friend who quit drinking a couple months after me, so her and I really, like, kind
Mm,
of like, held on to one another. It was nice, but also too, it was just like, I just had to I just figured it out. And like I said, when you have something in front of you every day to
yeah.
remind you, like, oh my God, I lost a rescue animal twice in my drinking. Like,
Mm,
I was standing over our bed threatening my boyfriend's life at the time. Like, it's just
mm,
it was a constant reminder of where drinking always had led me, right?
yeah.
So it
Yeah.
really was just kind of sitting still those first couple months. I'm not going to say I sat home all the time, but I did. I went to work, and on the weekends, I stayed at home and kept my mind and hands busy by doing like arts and crafts and
Mm,
binge watching, because this was back in 2012 when streaming was just starting, and I binge watched the series Friday Night Lights. I do
mm.
explain that too in the book. It's like I had to do the complete opposite of how I lived in my sobriety. I had to do the complete 180 from active addiction to sobriety.
Yeah. Yeah. A
Mhm.
big, big shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can relate to the staying at home, because basically that's what I did for 2 months as well. I just sat on the
Hmm.
sofa and um drank tea and ate cake, because I think
Yep.
we do have to be still, as you said,
Still,
and just
you
sit.
you got to sit down.
Mm.
Usually on my podcast they say sit the f down, but I won't swear on here. I don't know what the rules are, but like you
You can
got to
swear.
sit to, because there's a hustle that we all get into in our
Mm.
active drinking. There's a hustle there, right? Where
Mm.
you're working people, you're trying to cover up for your lies, you're trying to cover up for your drinking. I mean, when my boyfriend asked me, at that time, he would always be like, "How much did you drink?" I'm like, "A beer and a shot," which was like 5 shots and
Yeah,
4 beers. Like there's
yeah.
constant. You're trying to always constantly spin the story in your
Mm.
favor. So that is why when you quit drinking, you need to just sit down and be quiet
Yeah, yeah.
and start. But don't you think though, sitting like that for 2 months, it aren't you happy you did that, because it made for like your long-term sobriety so much more beneficial?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk about it and say it was pretty boring, but also I needed it. I needed
Hmm.
to just sit down and be still and to figure
Hmm.
out kind of not who I was, because that comes later, but
Yes.
just to get used to, I suppose, being at home and not drinking. That was the first
Hmm.
thing for me. Like, how do you do a
Hmm.
Friday night and not drink? Well, you eat cake and binge watch. We watched
Hmm.
Danish drama
Hmm.
for the
Yep.
first couple of months. Anything really, just to rest, I think, because
Hmm.
it's so tiring, as you've just explained, spinning all the
Hmm.
plates and trying to keep up with yourself,
Hmm.
that physically sitting down is a good thing to do. But yeah,
Yes.
it gives us that pause, doesn't it, to work out, okay,
Yes.
like where do I
Right.
go from here?
Hmm.
So where did you go from there? How did you end up being a sober coach, a podcast host, and an author?
Yep. So I did go back to AA back in it was 2016. So I believe that was year 4 for me, I want to say.
Mm,
And I participated with the program for a summer, and I sat at a woman's table and I listened, because I am an observer of life. So I sat and listened, and I listened to women needing more,
mm,
and I also needed more at the time, where I needed something more empowering. And listening to women being like, I wish I could be able to be comfortable to go to a Tigers game, like a baseball game, and
mm.
sit there and participate. And we didn't get sober just to sit in our houses like this.
Yeah.
I I was participating at the time, but I understood how hard it was for some people, especially too if you don't have that support.
Mm,
um but a lot of the work has to be done within inside, right?
yeah.
So that's where Sober Vibes was created, in that, and it has just evolved into what it has today, because of all what not only I needed, but I listened to other women needed,
Mm,
who were in the same community as me.
yeah.
So, and it was very important to me. It just started off as an online space, and then grew, much more. And it was important for me to wait to start coaching, because I wanted to get very comfortable and heal
Yeah.
within myself,
Yeah.
because there is a lot of codependency that happens with people who have addiction issues. So I wanted to make sure that I was good and stable, and
Hmm.
it wasn't something that I was going to start then stop, because I knew once I started it, I was going to keep going with it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that involved, and then involved in the podcast, and I started the Sober Vibes podcast in 2020, then the book came out this past year. So it's all an evolution of
Hmm.
the timing it was all meant to happen.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's
Hmm.
so perfect. Perfect timing.
Yeah, and a lot too of what I do, I have to say, is I with the Sober Vibes community, it's really about meeting the person at where they're at, especially too with
Mm,
coaching. It's like, where are you at? Because we are not all at the same spot when
no.
we quit drinking alcohol. Again, that's why this is not a one size fits all program. It's just not,
Yeah.
but what really the message is about is just empowering and supporting you and not a shame-based type of situation.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And you talk about all of this in your book as well.
Yeah. So the book is, again, Sober Vibes, a guide to thriving in your first 3 months without alcohol. And
Yeah.
it takes you through that process.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes you through, like, what you would expect. Like, what are the questions you have in your mind, especially those first couple months? And I answer them. There's also journal prompts to go through because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of personal work that you have to do to like keep remembering your why. But let's just say in the beginning, like I tell you to clean out your cupboards, like get rid of the booze, stop having booze in the house. It's a
Yeah.
temptation. No, you're not going to keep on to that bottle of wine if your friends come over. Your friends can bring their own wine if you allow drinking in your house. And it's
Mm.
very this book is very specific and tailored. It makes the person, the reader, tailor their sobriety and recovery to their needs
Yeah.
and like stop listening to your neighbor Bob, that something that worked for him 50 years ago, it might not resonate with
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
as if you're not in this community, you don't understand that this community is going around. So a lot
Mm.
of people still don't understand that there's podcasts and there's Instagram accounts or there's
Yeah.
Pinterest accounts where people are talking about this out loud. um all
Yeah.
they think that sobriety is you go to AA. So it's options
Yeah.
of what would feel good for you, or they don't understand that there's therapists out there who now specifically specialize in addiction.
Mm.
So it's really taking the reader in that direction of tailoring it to you and what works for you and how to socialize without alcohol, grieving your old drinking self.
Yeah. There is a
Mhm,
process of grief, isn't
mhm,
there? Mm.
mhm,
Yeah. So you're giving people the tools that they need, and they can then
mhm.
use these tools to navigate their own path, I
Yep.
suppose, in a way that suits them. Um,
Yeah.
Lovely. And tell me about your tools, Courtney. What are some of your favorite tools to keep you sober and high vibe? I can
Yeah.
say.
So, well, since day one, it's always been gratitude, right? It's always,
Yeah.
I mean, before I got into writing down my gratitude list each day, I would just wake up and say, thank you for another day sober. Like,
Mm-hmm.
before my
Yeah.
feet planted on the ground of getting out of the bed, I would just wake up and say that. And that's what I had a lot and still to this day. It's just like, thank you for another day of participating in this life sober. So
Yeah.
gratitude has been it for day one. And then I switched to a gratitude journal. And honestly, a lot of people think that gratitude journal, you need to write out like 101 things and it needs to be so long. Every day I just write 5 things.
Yeah.
And like today, yeah, I can't even tell you how many times I repeated like hot coffee. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because with the 2-year-old, like that's not, some days that just doesn't happen. So
No, it's cold by the time you get to it. Yeah.
right, or just like a good night's sleep. So like you can keep the gratitude list very short.
Yeah.
Um if your brain doesn't operate in that, because again, that's what I'm saying, like some people want to write 5 pages of gratitude in a day and there's nothing wrong with it, but some people are like, nope, I'm good with 5. Like
Mm.
I don't feel the need to do more than that. So um my gratitude meditation I have gotten into in my sobriety, and that is also to a daily thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation has also helped me in the long run with reactiveness, because it
Yes.
really is, it's building that muscle, your brain. It's just like working, building a muscle, and that's what meditation does for your brain
Mm.
and too for your nervous system. I have to say that. Personal development, that I got into year 3, as I stated, and that has been huge. Personal development, reading other books besides Quit Lit,
Mm.
reading books, because once you get sober, and as you know, you are this grown adult, but you're like a new baby in this grown adult's body where you
Yeah.
have to, readjust to the world and start learning new things and to build yourself up. So personal development is huge for me.
Mm.
And I still do all of those today. It never stops for me. And then also to tapping in when I need help in areas. And I say that because not every year is the same in sobriety. You get to year one and it's different, then you get to year two and it's different, and things come up that you do have to work on and heal. And so
Yeah.
I'm a big lover of therapy, that I have been in and out. I mean, I've been in and out of therapy since I was a teenager. So I'm huge on therapy and coaches too. I've hired
Yeah.
coaches as well. So um it even if the pain is you can't, if your insurance doesn't cover it or you can't pay for a coach, I mean, there's the online communities that you can tap into, or even to for the 12-step programs. Like, you can tap into that and utilize it, but definitely getting support and help when I have needed it along these
Hmm.
11 years.
Yeah.
So those are tools. And like now another tool that I use, and it's just walking. Like, I've
Mm.
really embraced these daily walks all summer long, and I just love them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I love that.
Hmm.
And it's the simple things as well, which I think are the most profound and have the most effect. That we don't have to do anything particularly fancy. We just have to, I'm saying just, it's not just anything, but listen to ourselves and go with what feels good,
Hmm.
good, simple, wholesome things like walking, like meditation, like
Hmm.
gratitude and journaling and asking for help. They're not big or
Yeah, and
scary or complicated, but they work.
they work. And all of those things, besides tapping into a therapist or coaching, are free.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, even with, you could go to a library and get books. You can listen to podcasts for free.
Yeah.
YouTube. There's stuff on there, and that's the whole thing. It's like at some point the excuses have to stop, because it's it's free.
Yeah.
Like, and tap into that. That's what it's there. I think people get when you ask me like what tools I use, I think people get caught up in like, well, that they think like tools are I have to go to 12 steps, or I have to go to therapy,
Mm.
or right? Like, you don't have to do that. Those are helpful things.
Yeah.
But simple tools to help you with day-to-day stress
Mm.
is walking,
Yeah.
meditation,
Yeah.
listening to a podcast about growth in the human experience, or some emotional intelligence, stuff like that, or some
Mm.
healing from alcoholic parents as well. Like, and that's just something that people have to understand, it is help. It's help.
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
And you're right. It's not something that you have to do because sometimes I think it can feel overwhelming. Certainly, my experience before I stopped, one of the reasons that I probably didn't quit earlier was the thought of all the things I would have to do to keep me kind of on the straight and narrow. And it
Yeah.
can get overwhelming. But you're right. We can take what we need and leave what we don't. But it is
Mhm.
important to know that these things are out there. And there's so many different things now, which is such a positive. I think there's a sober path for
Mhm.
everybody.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. What sobriety looked like 50 years ago it's not gonna look like that nowadays. It's just not. It's a different time. It's a different world.
Mm,
Some people think that if you take an antidepressant or you're on medication, then you're not sober. And it's like,
mm,
no. To
yeah.
who? To who says that? And that's when you talk about overwhelm. I talk about overwhelm a lot in the book, because I am one person who believes on taking on one thing at a time. And especially in those first 90 days, you're
Hmm.
already overwhelmed by just the fact of not drinking. So, like, if all you do for 90 days is not drink alcohol, amazing, you are winning.
Yeah.
Because even too early on, I'm like, and I've had women say this to me, and I thought it too, where it's like, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
Like, should I be? in a program that I don't connect with. And at that time, like, but even after I participated, I'm like, okay, I'm good. I took what I wanted. I need the rest. I don't foresee myself in this forever. And that is okay.
Yeah,
But, and then, you get other people's opinions in there and it's like, well, no, you should be in there. And it's like, says who? It
exactly.
says who? What's working for me is working. I'm not drinking today.
Mm.
Great.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Aw. Before I let you go, Courtney, can you share well, one or two things or whatever comes to mind, the best thing about living your alcohol-free lifestyle that you live?
The best thing for me, I have to say, is that um, being a sober mom.
Yeah.
These years leading up to having my son, I had him at 38 years old, and I'm so very grateful that I had that time, even though it was a situation where it was trying to conceive took 6 years.
Mm,
But those years really helped me be able to take on what comes in motherhood. Because I think if I had
mm,
motherhood early on in my sobriety, that might have broken me and where I could have easily slipped back to drinking.
mm.
But now having him, it's like I am a present mother.
Yeah.
That's the greatest gift that I can pass on to him. That's the greatest gift I can give him every day, is that he is not going to come from a family of dysfunction like I had,
Mm,
and that stopped with me. So the next generation does not have to take that on.
yeah.
So yeah, so the best part, I mean, there's so many, but just right
There are,
now,
yeah.
I just think it was leading up of a greater picture, because even when I quit drinking, uh, Matt and I, my husband, we had that talk very early on when it's like, okay, because he gave up alcohol too. He didn't
Hmm.
have a problem, but just at that point, he was like, this doesn't do anything for me. I have 2 beers and I feel terrible the next day. I'm like, lucky you.
Yeah.
I wish I had that problem, but there are people that are they're just like, can take it or leave it, right?
Mm,
But we always talked about when we had kids, we didn't want the kids to understand that. So I'm
yeah.
just very, very grateful that I have that present um that presence with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, I love that. And finally, if somebody's listening to this and they really resonate with what you're saying, or if they're struggling, what piece of advice would you like to give them today?
To not give up on yourself.
Mm,
That it might be a very hard day for you, and that is okay, because we all have very hard days. We have high highs, low lows, right? Like,
yeah.
and there's some days, and it's not because you're sober. It's just
Mm,
it's life, right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's just life. And that if you're struggling, just not to give up. And if you need to go to bed early, please go to bed early, because sometimes that helps a lot,
Oh,
of
yeah.
just like going to bed early, but like, you and your life are worth it, and to just give it another day sober.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Courtney. And just remind us about your book. It's out now for worldwide shipping.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's out. Yep, out now, worldwide, and it's called Sober Vibes: A Guide to Thriving in Your First 3 Months Without Alcohol, and it's on Amazon, wherever you get your books. It
It's
is
there.
on. So, or you can go to my website, CourtneyRecovered.com, and then there's a list of places too where you can buy it.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you, Courtney. It's been such a joy to talk to you today. I know everyone's going to love it. Thank you.
Thank you.